Part 4. Reassembling your Vespa carburetor. For this, you will need the following: bladed screwdriver, socket wrench with 8mm head and spanner, small needle nose pliers, and rubber gloves. Now, let's get started rebuilding that carburetor. First off, start by grabbing the carburetor body and turning it over. We'll start by replacing the rubber grommet on the overflow gasket on the back of it. You might want to use a bladed screwdriver to help you put this on. Next up, we'll want to assemble the slide assembly. The full assembly is made up of slide, spring, pin slide, and the front piece. First, take the small little rubber grommet piece and slide it into the front end. Then you can slide the pin through the front end. Next, connect the slide to the rod and spring. These will slide into the carburetor body. Compress this in and hold it tight. Then, using the bladed screwdriver, screw the slide assembly back into place. Pull back and forth on the pin slide and make sure that the slide glides safely and effortlessly. If you have any problems, try loosening and try reassembling again. Next up, we're going to reassemble the choke lever. This is pretty easy, as you simply slide the lever back into the carburetor body. Use a bladed screwdriver and tighten the screw, and be careful not to over tighten, as this will cause the choke lever to seize up. Lastly, don't forget to try the lever itself. Make sure that it moves and operates smoothly. If not, loosen just a little bit. Next up, we're going to reinstall all of the jets. Take each jet and slide them into their respective holes. Using a bladed screwdriver, you can now tighten each of them in. Do not over tighten these, as they can strip and ruin the carburetor body if over tightened. Next up, we're going to install the idle jet screw back into the top of the carburetor. Using your fingers, screw it all the way back in. Once you have it all the way in, turn the carburetor over and watch the slide as you slowly unscrew it again. The slide itself should be cracked open to start with by about 5mm. As you unscrew the adjuster, you will begin to see it close. Adjust the slide so it stays open about 1 to 3mm. This doesn't have to be perfect, because at the end of all of this, you're going to readjust it when it's in the engine. The next step we're going to take is to reattach the air adjustment screw on the back of the carburetor. Make sure the screw has the needed spring in it before reattaching. You should be able to use your fingers here to screw it all the way back in. If not, use a bladed screwdriver. Now that you have it all the way back in, take that same bladed screwdriver and unscrew it exactly 1.5 revolutions. Your air mixture should be close to perfect here, but again, at the end of all of this, it's best to do a little fine-tuning once it's back into the engine. The next step is to reassemble the float assembly. Start by grabbing the float assembly and place the plastic filter in the top area where you pulled it earlier before. Then replace the paper gasket on the inside lid. Place the lid back on top of the float assembly, and using a bladed screwdriver, tighten this down. Once again, don't over tighten here. You want to make sure it's snug and tight, but not too much, as this can strip and damage the carburetor. Now, turn the float assembly over and start by placing a new paper gasket on the float area. Make sure it aligns with both the carburetor body and the float assembly. The next step is to seat the float needle into the plastic float and place them together into the float assembly. Depending on your carburetor, you can probably slide the little float pivot pin in with your hands, but in some cases you'll want to use a needle nose pliers to slide them into place. Next up, take the float assembly and place it into the carburetor body. Using either a bladed screwdriver or an 8mm socket wrench, tighten the two bolts in. Note, these two screws should also have a flat or wavy washers. As usual, do not over tighten here, as you can strip the carburetor and permanently damage it. Lastly, slide the two special 13mm nuts that hold the carburetor body to the carburetor box back onto the carburetor. Each one has a flat or a lock washer, and you are nearly ready to put your carburetor back into your scooter.